Changes. What's going on, everybody? Jim here from RC After Dark. Please allow me a moment here to explain some changes that I've done to the Rc4wd Trail Finder 2. Out here filming today, guys and gals, outside on the RC After Dark Off-Road Adventure Park and Trail. Getting ready to take the TF2 out and see how she does after doing some significant changes to the vehicle. Actually, some significant changes since the last video, as a matter of fact. Quite a few changes. So, last video, everybody, I was doing a lot of complaining about the Rc4wd R3 2-speed transmission and how much slop was in that transmission, talking about wanting to get a single-speed transmission for the truck. Well, to tell you the truth, everybody, I would very much love to get a single-speed transmission for this truck. The only thing is that costs right around $75 to $80, and I'm not really too hip on paying that kind of money for a single-speed transmission. So let me tell you a little story about what I did to fix that. And some other things on the truck. So let's just start off, everybody, with the truck here real quick. This time last year, that truck was gigantic. Towering over top of that TRX4 Bronco, towering over top of my Armanero of all things, sporting a set of Proline 2.2 Super Swamper tires and more than enough lift and suspension travel to clear the tires. But that kind of pigeonholed the truck, everybody. It was only good for two things, playing in the snow and playing in the mud. It wasn't good for anything else being lifted up that tall. So decided to lower it back down bit by bit, slowly but surely, trying to find the sweet spot, trying to optimize this truck and get it to its optimal performance level. So since the last video, everybody, I've done some suspension changes to the vehicle. I've done some motor changes to the vehicle. I've relayed out the electronics on the vehicle. A lot of weight loss to the vehicle. It was 12 pounds in the last video, and it is 9 pounds in this video. So 4 pounds of weight have been shaved since the last video. And like I said, a lot of changes to the truck. So number one, everybody, just looking at the suspension, the truck is noticeably lower than it was in the previous video. What I did with that, I am sporting some Rc4wd internally sprung non-oil filled shocks on all four corners, 100mm shocks. And what I did is I used a set of Rc4wd super soft 90mm shock springs and put those inside my 100mm shock bodies. Now, the shock springs aren't any shorter than the 100mm shock springs, but they are significantly softer, and that essentially sagged out my suspension, lowering the truck, giving me much more suspension sag and droop, lowering the center of gravity. So basically, this is where we're sitting at right now. Our normal ride height currently pretty much sagged out, but it's not fully compressed. We still have more travel to go before we're compressed, and a lot of upward travel right there. So not too sure if that droop is going to be beneficial or not, but it definitely lowered the center of gravity on the vehicle. So I did that on all four corners, changed out the shock springs. Second thing that I did to the vehicle, everybody, is I lowered the body once more on the vehicle. I had it lowered in the last video, but I lowered it again since then. So I've got the body as low as I could possibly take it right now. I can't lower it any farther than it currently is, but we'll take a peek at that. And there is a little side view of the TF2 and the Bronco. Yes, I know it's sitting on a warp board, so not exactly totally even right there. This is our sagged out position here with the truck sitting all the way down currently with its sagged out suspension. Being lifted up, it's still sitting up quite a bit taller than the TRX4 Bronco. Still have enough room underneath the transfer case to get my fist completely closed underneath there without hitting it. So still have all that travel and whatnot. As far as the body lift goes, everybody, I made my own body mounts for this truck pretty much on day one. Rc4wd's body lift mounts were on back order, so I used a plastic plate as a body lift, drilled several holes on the back half of it, have 2 screws going into the original body mounts and a couple screws coming back out. So multiple holes on the back half of here so I can adjust my body to whatever height that I want. The 2 screws sticking back out. Body simply spreads apart over top of the screws, and the pressure of that plastic clamping together holds it in place. So works out pretty good, but nevertheless, we are sitting down as low as we possibly can, sitting on top of these screws back here. Also, the tailgate of the truck is actually resting right back here on the rear bumper mount, so that will not go down any lower, and the bed of the truck itself is resting on a bundle of wires coming out of my receiver. Now at this height, it's still pretty decent. I still can get full articulation out of my suspension without actually rubbing on the body, so that's pretty good right there. A little crunchy there in the front, but there we go. Full articulation on the front, no rubbing going on with that either, so all set in that area as far as that aspect goes. Alright, so we've got the body off of the truck, and then just looking over the side here, everyone, Talking about that receiver, that bundle of wires, this is that bundle of wires that I'm talking about. Receiver's been plastic dipped several times. Have a big bundle of servo extensions coming off of that. Can't push that down any farther. She will not budge. And you can actually see a little wear mark right here where the body has actually been resting on top of that bundle of wires right there. So that's about as low as I can go with the body once again. As far as the weight loss goes, everybody, changed out the battery in the vehicle. I did have a plasti-dipped hard case RC King 7,200 milliamp 2S LiPo, and that battery was quite large, being plasti-dipped and also being a hard case battery, was eating up the entire battery tray here from end to end on these screw points. Actually had to loosen up these little stoppers to get that battery to fit in here. Quite a bit wider, quite a bit thicker than this battery, and roughly twice the weight of this battery. So replace that other RC King battery with a Durtrax Onyx 5700 milliamp 2S LiPo, also plasti-dipped, but like I said, this is a soft pack, half the size and half the weight of the other battery. So lost some weight with that. Other weight reduction that we've done, or that I've done, is remove the shift servo. Previously, everyone, I had a shift servo sitting right here, wired winch controller sitting on top of that. Over on this side, I had my ESC and a wireless winch controller underneath the ESC. So the wireless winch controller, both winch controllers are plasti-dipped. Wireless one goes to my winch, wired one goes to my lights, so I can automatically toggle my lights on and off via the radio or the remote control. So nevertheless, everybody, move some stuff around. Have the ESC sitting over here by itself, remove the shift servo, and have both winch controllers sitting on top of each other over on this side, just trying to balance that weight out a little bit. Going into the transmission, everybody, looking at our transmission, here is our shift linkage right here, and we can see that that moves nice and free there. No, I am not trying to pleasure the transmission. I'm just showing you all that that has been completely disconnected. So looking at the transmission, everybody, once again, R3 2-speed transmission. A lot of slop in that transmission between high gear and low gear, mainly from the shift drum. And we'll get into that here in 1 second. I'll show you a nice little picture, a little drawing on that. But to explain it, everybody, looking at our spur gear, there's actually so much slop in that transmission, everybody, that I could turn the spur gear from the 1 o'clock position all the way around to 11 o'clock before the drive shafts would actually start to spin. So that's how much slop was in there in between the shift drum and the gear itself. Currently, everybody, I have removed the slop in the transmission. So if we pan back here and take a peek at, look at our output shaft there on the trans, and look at our spur gear, we can see that it is completely 1-to-1. So the slop in the transmission has been taken care of. No more slop whatsoever in this transmission, and I'll explain exactly how I did that. Now I could have did a video on this, everybody, about what I did to remove that slop, but I didn't for several reasons, and we'll get into that. So taking off the back half of the transmission, first thing that I did, everybody, was I removed the 2 screws right here on the bottom of the transfer case so I could loosen up the transfer case. Second thing I did is I removed this little drive shaft right here going in between the transmission and the transfer case, and then I left the transmission attached to the truck and just removed all the screws at the back half of the transmission here to remove the back half of the transmission. There is no diagrams on to show you the inside of this transmission, but I drew a little diagram to show you what we're looking at. We have a low gear on this side, a high gear on this side, 2 corresponding idler gears on the other side, and a shift drum in the middle, and a shift fork that slides down in between the drum to engage low gear or high gear. Low gear is on this side, high gear is on this side. All hardened steel gears within, everybody, all hardened steel gears. If you're thinking about gluing them, forget about it, because it's probably not going to stick. I tack welded my gears, everybody. I basically tack welded. Well, here's what I basically did. I separated that transmission off the back of here. I pulled that gear set out of there, removed the shift fork from the drum, or from the shaft right there, and then arc welded the shift drum directly to low gear, and then arc welded the shift drum directly to the shaft, to the output shaft right here. So welded that in 3 places where the shaft meets the where the shaft meets the drum, and in 3 places where the drum meets low gear. So completely welded, everybody. That baby is 1-to-1, not going anywhere, no slop, and no worries about it coming apart. Things you have to be careful about when you're doing this is like welding spatter and things of that nature, overheating it. Once again, didn't do a video on it because not everybody has an arc welder and not everybody knows how to weld or has access to one. So reason I didn't do the video. But if you do have access to a welder, be very careful that you don't overheat it and you don't warp the shaft, when you're welding the shift drum to the shaft, that you don't warp the shaft, and that you don't get any welding spatter on top of the gears. So you got to be very careful about that little process there. Now, if you excuse the crude drawing here, everybody, once again, there's no pictures of the inside of this transmission, so this is basically what we're looking at here. We've got our high gear over here, our low gear over here, two corresponding idler gears. There is our shift drum that sits in between high gear and low gear. There is where our shift fork would engage that drum to slide it into low gear or to push it forward into high gear. Looking at the drum, it has three little steel pegs that stick out on the front and on the back half of the drum. I know there's only two in the picture, but there's three there. And this is what the back edge of the gear would look like. It has these three oval-shaped grooves in the gear, and that is where those teeth would line up into the gear. And that is also where all your slop occurs, is right in between all those grooves. So once again, I tack welded the shift drum directly to low gear, and then tack welded the shift drum directly to that output shaft to lock everything up. Everything is still intact inside the transmission. High gear is still there. All the idler gears are still there. Only thing that's missing from the inside of the transmission is the actual shift fork itself that goes from the linkage shaft here to the shift fork. So I just disconnected that. So no shift fork on the transmission once again. So that is just neutraled out right there, just floating back and forth doing absolutely nothing. So that is a peek of what we did, everybody. And once again, if you decide to take this upon yourself, be careful that you don't overheat this and warp this shaft, and that you don't get any welding spatter on your gears. Otherwise, rock solid way to go. Eliminates all the slop, one-to-one transmission, working out perfect. So basically, everybody, the only slop that is in the transmission currently, or in the drivetrain currently, is coming from all of my U-joints. I'm running a set of Rc4wd drive steel Punisher drive shafts. They've been on this truck, everybody, since day one. So they've been on here for well over 3 years, well over 150 hours of video time. So who knows how much actual drive time that we have on it. But as we can see, looking at these U-joints, there is quite a bit of slop in that U-joint right there. Now, if you can imagine that all the way down the line, you start amplifying all that slop. That is where all my drivetrain slop is coming from currently, is just inside the U-joints themselves. Absolutely no slop between the spur gear and the actual drivetrain, as you can see as I'm moving the spur gear. So that's all one-to-one right there. Once again, a little bit of slop still in the drive shafts themselves. Nothing I can do about that other than replacing the U-joints. And then the last upgrade that I made to the truck, everybody, was swapping out the motor. I did have a Rc4wd drive 65 turn motor in here, and then I swapped in a Rc4wd drive 35 turn. So upped its game a little bit in that area. Would probably be better off or more beneficial with a 45 turn ultimately. Last couple things that I need to do to the truck to get it to right where it needs to be is to replace the steering servo. Have a Savox SW0231 steering servo in here, waterproof. I believe this is right around 208 inch ounces of torque, which is obvious, or which unfortunately isn't enough torque for this truck. So need to up the ante a little bit on that. Previously had a Savox SW1210 steering servo in here, which is right around 408 inch ounces of torque, roughly double that. So need to get another one of those. I took the servo out of that and put it into my Bronco. So the Bronco currently has a 1210 in it, and I'm on out shopping to get another 1210 for this one. Other than that, everyone, only other thing that I really need to do is possibly get some new shocks for it. Replacing these internally sprung shocks with some nice oil-filled shocks would definitely be beneficial. And there you go, we got her all back together. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death on all the inner workings of that transmission. All right, everybody, we're going to get this truck plugged in, take her out on the course, and see what she can do. So stay tuned for that next video. Hopefully, hopefully, like I said, I didn't bore you to death on this one. Alrighty, very much appreciate it, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.